The big question, will a robot steal my job? It's become a bit of a cliche across academia, across media, and even in the office space, but it's still a bit unanswerable with numbers all over the place depending on the economy, the industry, and the specific role. Here in Asia, the technology is moving ahead while policymakers and businesses struggle to ensure their workers aren't left behind. We see rampant government experimentation in fintech, including here in Singapore. Cyber tech in some public spaces is outrunning sci-fi episodes like Black Mirror. We see an app for everything, including a super app for everything. And even automation is being automated, as McKinsey can tell you. So where does that leave us? Rapid aging in parts of Asia is an extra nudge for the robots, while politics in many parts of the world argue for preservation of jobs, period. Many workers in this region fall somewhere in the middle, wanting to adapt but unsure of how to do so. And whether and how businesses adapt will have a great impact on big investment decisions and right on down to each paycheck, as Oliver and Ravi can tell you. So what I want to do is start out with where things stand and what are the sentiments now. Of course, the big debate being whether we can make automation work for the worker. Oxford Economics estimates that every one robot means 1.6 fewer jobs. But other surveys have a little bit of a different tone. A recent one by Dentsu Aegis showed that half of consumers across the Asia-Pacific actually still have faith that technology will create jobs for them. So I guess my first question to Ravi and to Oliver is, do you think sentiments have changed over the past few years in this? And to what extent are workers and employers alike embracing automation as at least a job preserver or something that will be good for the labor market?
So let's start with just a couple of numbers. Start here in Singapore, where we are right now. 44% of tasks in Singapore today are automatable. 44% of tasks. The amount of tasks that are automatable depends a little bit on which sector you're in, but the 44% is an average. The high is in manufacturing jobs and transport and logistics. On the low end of the spectrum are jobs in healthcare and what have you. So already today, a huge amount of jobs are automatable. So there's no doubt that this is going to have widespread consequences, and that is globally. I mentioned the Singapore numbers. The numbers are marginally different country by country. It depends a little bit on the makeup of the economies. So this has big, big implications. Second point I want to make is we've looked at how many jobs will be created and how many will be impacted. Now, even though there's a large percentage of tasks that are automatable, there are very few jobs where you can actually automate the whole job. Very few jobs where you can automate the whole job. So everybody gets impacted, but few jobs that disappear completely. Having said that, globally, we estimate that by 2030, somewhere between 300 and 500 million jobs will get destroyed, I think was the word you used. But there's an additional 400 to 600 million jobs that get created because of technology, broadly speaking.
Yeah, I think that's good. The way we think about it is very similar. I don't have better numbers than Oliver, but I would say adoption by companies has been varied from company to company and region to region. So I would think that the developed markets where resources are constrained have adopted AI-led process improvements and productivity tools a lot faster because they are resource constrained and that really helps them. But countries where perhaps labor is abundant and the low-level work is being done have adopted it slower. But to your point, I think it is inevitable. It is here, and adopting it in a way that makes your company and the worker more efficient at what they do is absolutely critical.
Do you think there's any difference in sentiment, or at least a marked discrepancy between how the workers and businesses are approaching, at least in terms of attitude, the automation changes and how they affect the jobs?
Absolutely. Let's call a spade a spade. Listen, for I think companies, this is about thinking about the next 10, 20, 30 years. And companies have time to evolve, they think, transition larger groups of people. Whereas for an individual, it's my job is changing radically next year. My job will be gone. I remember last year I was asked by somebody, and I was talking about, the wonderful benefits of technology, and somebody says, how do you think that, the guy that changes tires on cars in Bangkok feels about his job disappearing? Not good. There's a huge difference in how companies think about this versus individuals think about this.
Right.
And by the way, there's not, individuals are all individuals. The skilled workers, educated, they will think about, there's lots of interesting new jobs that I can have, new things I can learn and grow. Whereas, if you're uneducated, you're into labor, physical labor, then you're really worried. My job will disappear. So I think this is, for some people, that change will feel traumatic for individuals. But I do think here's where companies, where governments can help in that transition.
Yeah, I think companies, the companies that I think will succeed the best are companies that will try and figure out a way to create the new job and before they retire the old job, if I can call it that. So, and there you will find the transition is much easier. Where the problems are coming, as Oliver was outlining, are cases where the transition has either not been planned properly, or the disruption has been so quick that retraining, reskilling, and upskilling has just not happened in a controlled manner. So I think it's important from a company perspective, and as we deploy capital, we look at owners and managers who are thinking ahead and saying, well, this is where I need to use AI. This is the data I have, and the data-driven approach can help me deploy AI smarter in this process or in this place or in this region. And therefore, this is where I will have the disruption, and how do I think about reskilling my workforce?
That is one reason why I asked about the discrepancy, because it seems from the surveys that a lot of workers say, I'm willing to adapt, I just don't know what's the path forward, where's the training, what's the job, what does that look like? So maybe sometimes it's just that clarity. I do want to bring in the audience on a poll. The poll should be up on the screen. This is all about kind of identifying where you're at in terms of your comfort and your embrace of AI. So if you can see it here, a recent Boston Consultant Group MIT survey offers 4 labels. So I asked you to just, which one best fits you? Pioneer, that understands and has adopted AI. Investigator, that understands but is not deploying AI fully. Experimenter, piloting and adopting without deep understanding. Or a passive, not much adoption or much understanding of AI. Just trying to see where, this is a pretty savvy audience, but so okay, mostly generally in the experimental realm. I guess that would be where we would we would probably find ourselves with this audience.
Are we allowed to?
Yes, please, chime in.
See, I'm sorry to say this, but technology moves quickly. I actually think that this way of thinking about it is already a little bit dated. Sorry about that, but
in terms of labeling.
Yeah, the labels, because there's experimenter and pioneer and what have you. What we look for are, when you see companies, there's a huge difference between the ones that are piloting, and many are stuck in what we call pilot purgatory, versus the ones that are actually scaling. So I think, I was on that list, I missed that language of scaling, that language of taking it and starting to apply it beyond a single pilot or a use case and starting to scale it across the company and what have you. So I think we see the companies that are getting to that, those are the ones that are ahead. Those are the ones that are going to win, at least in the short term.
Right, right. Well, that does lead in my next question, though, is that, when you're looking for global champions for investment or for advising and really planning for the long term, what are the markers of success around automation and jobs? I mean, is it whether they have training programs in place? Are you looking at success rates or, worker happiness? How do you judge that from your positions?
I think all of that and more, I would say. You think about what makes a company successful. What makes a company successful are its people. Artificial intelligence is intelligence that sat with humans before it landed up in the machines. And I think that intelligence level has to be now taken to the next level, which is how do you think about deploying AI in your company, in your processes, in your products, or in your marketing, in your accounting, in your back office, that makes your company more efficient, that increases the level of productivity. As you increase productivity, you have accumulation of better wealth. As you accumulate more wealth, you can deploy that wealth and then try and retrain your workers and try and re-educate them, upskill them, and help them become more useful. Or if you have a part of a company that's fully disrupted by AI, let's say, it no longer that job doesn't exist. Perhaps these people who actually did that work before are the right guys to maintain that AI system, because they kind of know what it took to get that process successful in the first lot. The
Right.
machine is just doing it faster, better, quicker. But that doesn't mean that the elements of what made that particular process successful did not sit with the people who actually did it.
But it is that sort of human element. You'll take
Yes.
that into
Absolutely.
account for your investment decision.
Because I think you need someone to evolve and take it to the next level. And machine learning can do some of it, but I don't think we should ever ignore the fact that human intelligence is larger than machine intelligence.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oliver, I mean, McKinsey uses numbers all over the place. I mean, are there certain barometers that you look at in terms of specifically on automation and jobs when you're looking at a specific company?
Number one, yes, there are, and we have, as you can imagine, we have digital benchmarks, we have and all kinds of. We do a digital quotient. We can also do an AI quotient around how advanced is the company, and that's fine. I actually find it more interesting to look at 3 different factors about a company, and we can really see and sense the difference around the ones that are ahead versus the ones that are a little bit behind. Number one, do they talk about value in solving business problems, as opposed to are they talking about technology as let's experiment for the sake of technology? There's a big difference. Solving business problems, solving value creation, as opposed to technology for the sake of technology. Number one. Number two is how companies think and act when it comes to organization, and I mean organization in a broad sense. What is the culture? We've moved from a world where now it's about creativity, it's about innovation. It is about partnering with a broad set of partners. Sometimes they're competitors. But these are all, there's a different mindset. And it's very easy when you come into a top team, and you can feel this quite quickly. On organization is also, what is the state? How agile is that company now? How are they thinking about what are the critical skills that are required for this? And by the way, we measure how many types of UX engineers do they have, how many data scientists, and so forth. The third is technology itself, but it's also thinking about the IT systems and the backbone. And are they stuck in trying to change everything? Have they outsourced everything to a single integrator, or are they actually looking for the best of breed in different types of solutions and adopting their technology solutions in a much quicker way? So it's these kind of conversations in the top team and the middle management, you get a very good feel quickly for how well a company is doing.
So we've talked about a few of the hurdles, the lack of clarity. For those that haven't done it quite right, the lack of clarity, lack of vision perhaps, maybe not putting the human first. I want to ask, across different geographies, across different industries, and please be as specific as you like, who are the ones that are getting it right? Is this a specific economy that you're looking at, and maybe from an investment perspective or advising perspective, who do you want to work with? Who do you want to invest in that's really doing it right on automation and jobs?
I think it's come down to approach of managers and owners of businesses, if I can put it that way. And what do I mean by that? You have a business that exists for maybe 30, 40, 50 years. It serves its customers well. In comes a new company then that thinks about disrupting that business. And what do they disrupt? They disrupt the way that business works and the productivity level at which that business is working. And then they try and get things to their customers in a more efficient manner at probably a lower price. A lot of that is being driven by learning coming through data. We talk about AI, we talk about automation. Automation's been happening since the Industrial Revolution. Technology revolution has taken it to the data side. Data is now driving a lot of that learning. So I think when we look at a company, and say, well, what data can they utilize? How high quality is that data? With that data, what can they improve? And often you find the winners are the ones that are accessing rich data. They know what data to pull out, what data is useful. They're then using that data to improve their particular process. It could be either a service, it could be a ride share, it could be a selling of a product, it could be simply solving your logistics in e-commerce. It could be processing automation of your software. It could be many things. And a lot of that is being driven by what I would call machine learning of data. And provided you have people who can do that properly, write the better algorithm that gets you to that quicker outcome at a cheaper cost, I think is the one that you should think about carefully as someone who will lead and win.
Are there specific sectors that you like within industry that are doing it well?
Yeah, I think there's several that I would like. I think there's the whole software space is obviously critical in this. There's the consumer internet space is very critical because a lot of data is being developed, and banks are important because the banks have a lot of data. The telecom companies on a drive for transformation, but they have a lot of data, but they haven't been able to utilize that as well as they probably could. So yeah, I think this is an industry-wide. This is not applicable to anything. And I think on your question about regions, I think the developed world probably has the most to worry about going forward because a very large, significant chunk of their GDP, maybe 60-70%, is coming from consumption. And as AI disrupts, that's where we will see more causes for job losses. So I think we should think about companies that are focused in that part of the region probably think about that more. Companies that are focused in areas where there's lower level work being done, which is more repetitive in nature, that's being already automated. But for them to migrate is going to be more difficult.
Oliver, who do you like?
I was taking notes when Ravi was speaking. Temasek usually get it right when it comes to investing. Listen, let me take a slightly different angle. And I heard also what Ravi said about developing world. Let me start with Asia. To me, the good news is I actually think we're in the right part of the world for the companies that are in Asia. And the reason is, I think we need to talk about more than only technology because it works together with a few other things. Number one, you look at where, from now until 2040, 50% of the growth in the world's consumer demand is going to be in Asia. It's a big place, but here in Asia. If you look at the changing trade patterns that we see and the changing where companies place their supply chains, there's a mini revolution going on. It's been accelerated by trade tensions and what have you. These things work together with technology, right? So Asia is the place where we're seeing significantly more growth than any other, right? Depending on what you read, 5, 6, 7% in India, 5.x% in ASEAN going forward. Even China at 6% is adding in Australia every year. So these are huge opportunities for new investment, but also for improving ongoing, for improving current production sites and what have you. This is where the opportunities are as well, right? And you inject technology, broadly speaking, in there, and we have opportunities to leapfrog, right? All of the countries surrounding us right now in Singapore have variations of initiatives in terms of industrial IoT, in terms of e-commerce, what have you. Everybody is on this. So we're seeing a lot of activity, a lot of investment also in our part of the world. So good news is we're in the right place.
Do you think that's an attitude that's shared more broadly? I mean, we've talked about the trade war in different respects all day here in these panels, and you mentioned this is a time of opportunity. Do you think a lot of people share that optimism within business and those that are addressing the automation issues?
Yep.
Yeah, I think broadly, yes. But I mean, if you look forward, there are a lot of studies that talk about the fact that 1 in every 5 jobs will likely be will have to change in Asia, and 1 out of every 8 jobs will likely be eliminated over a period of time thanks to AI. So there's optimism about. I guess it's all about embracing the change and then moving forward with it and deploying it to make your business better,
right.
And making your workers, frankly, benefit from that change. I mean, companies that are looking at the disruption from AI are looking at retraining and educating their workers better. If you educate the workers better, for example, innovation hub, right? You create an innovation hub, you get people to come and they come and learn, then become more employable, not just with you, but with other people too. And that is one aspect of what you have to do. And then companies and economies that are trying to figure this out and saying, look, we have all these learnings from AI, we have all these benefits from AI, how can we spread that to the wider society so everyone gains and benefits? That's also critical as we go forward. So there are a lot of things that need to be done.
So looking kind of more toward the future, first I want to ask, do either of you think about your jobs being automated? Is that even possible from an investment standpoint, from a consulting standpoint? Is that something that you'd see in the future? What does that job look like? What do your roles look like 10, 20, 50 years from now?
So listen, absolutely. I'm a consultant, and within McKinsey, we have seen huge change in what people spend time on. Now, we hire more and more and more people, but what the people do is quite different than it was 10 years ago. So we have much more databases, IT solutions, and what have you. So it's not only teams on the ground at the client side. So, our profession is changing massively. Also, yes, absolutely my job too. The amount of time I spend getting up to speed on topic X, in the old days, I would have to read through, large stacks, and I would have somebody find those stacks of documents for me. Today, it is very easily accessible. If I look at, we try to figure out what's going on in an industry, the amount of data using AI, finding patterns and finding new solutions, developing algorithms, all of these things are new relative to just a few years ago. So for sure, it's changing our jobs, but I think it's a little bit symptomatic. Having said that, the jobs are very different, but there are more and more and more jobs.
I think my job, if I was still doing it 10 years from now, would be a lot easier than it is today. And that's because of some of the points that Oliver made. For example, in Temasek, we put into place an AI pod a year or so ago, and we got people from different parts of the organization, pulled them into the pod and said, okay, now you guys focus on how do you look at all the information that sits within the portfolio and try and come up with data and analysis to show how we can improve the way we invest, how we can improve the way our companies synergize amongst themselves, how we can pass on those learnings to our portfolio companies so they can do a better job at what they do. And I think if we can go down that path and we can really institutionalize that, the ability to take decisions with less mistakes becomes a lot, the probability goes much higher to make the right decisions with less mistakes. And that really will make my job easier.
So just to take the flip side then, if that's the ideal scenario, things get easier, more data and it's used properly and automation is kind of harmoniously integrated, what is the nightmare scenario? What is, a few decades from now, what do you not want to see your children and the next generation living in terms of automation? I mean, and does the current environment offer any guidelines for that? There's an anti-globalization sentiment, a lot of fear around this issue, but do you see that kind of fading away, or what's the worst case scenario?
Well, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about anti-globalization. I see that it's there. The question is, what do we do about it? I actually worry about, there are two things I worry about. Number one, I know that we love talking about the gig economy and that there's a lot, this will be excellent for many, many different reasons. Just think through, it's going to be a world where we're working harder and more harder and harder, and I think there's going to be more uncertainty. I saw in one of the charts you had, earnings actually does matter to many people, the stability and security of having an income. I worry in the new world that it's going to be very hectic to keep up. That's one. The other one I worry, I have a daughter, I worry about women. There are not enough women today that are studying STEM topics. If you look at the technology jobs today, it's even worse than in many other professions. So I worry that 10 years from now we'll figure out that there's a big drive in McKinsey. We call it all in. There's a big drive to have more women in leadership and participating in the workforce. That's not exactly the headline when it comes to technology today. So I worry 10 years we wake up and we've forgotten that.
And you've done a whole report on the different effects between men and women as well, right? It's from earlier this year for those for those interested. What do you see, Ravi?
The nightmare scenario, I don't know if there's a nightmare scenario, but I do think there are possible scenarios where we have to think about carefully. One is the fact that AI, cognitive tasks as well as robotic tasks are done entirely by machines. And now we live in a world where the machines are doing everything that today most humans do. And what do human beings do then? And I think that therein lies the question: can we pursue other things of talents that we want to pursue because we like to do that? And can we have a better life? Because of that fact that cognitive work has been done by machines and repetitive work has been done by robots, we now all of a sudden have a situation where enormous wealth has been created and then the distribution of that wealth. And therefore, maybe we're heading towards a situation where universal basic income becomes a reality, and therefore people can really have a lot of support, knowing that they will earn a certain amount of income, and therefore then they can deploy their time in doing stuff that they really want to pursue, and maybe we land up being better people as a race overall. And the nightmare scenario on the other side is that a lot of people lose their jobs, there's a lot of economic destruction, people did not retrain well, and all of a sudden we have people sitting around saying, oh, well, now we have nothing to do. And that is a nightmare scenario, but I don't think we get there, because I think there's enough focus by governments, by public sector, by private sector to try and think about how we can retain our workforce.
Well, the fact that you don't think there's going to be a nightmare scenario is a good note to end on. I'm mindful of the time, so we'll have to leave it at that. But thank you both, Oliver and Ravi, for that discussion.
Thank you. Thank you.